Alright, so in this video I'm going to make a fermented plant juice. This is one of the inputs from Korean natural farming. It gets used as a foliar spray on plants, but it's also used in a few of the other preparations, in the seed soak, in making IMO4. Yeah, it's 3 as well. And so basically what this is we're going to be using brown sugar, which I have here, and some of the weeds from our garden to make fertilizer that we can put on our plants that helps to revitalize them and give them resistance to disease. And the reason we use weeds from the garden is we try to select plants that are naturally vigorous, that grow quickly, because they have a lot of growth hormones which we are going to be extracting during this process and we'll be able to apply to our plants. This particular plant, it's similar to a mugwort. I'm here in Ecuador, so mugwort is not indigenous to this area, so this is something similar that I found. It has a similar leaf pattern, same bitterness, but one of the most important things is that it's incredibly drought resistant. Here in the dry season, this has been growing faster in my garden than my vegetables, which I water every day. This doesn't get any water. I've also seen this to be very disease resistant. I've seen some of these plants absolutely covered with little bugs, and the leaves don't even yellow and it continues growing just fine. And so this plant is exactly the kind of plant that we actually want to use in this fermented plant juice. There are a variety of other fermented juices that we can make with different plants which are good for different stages of plant growth. This particular one is going to be good for seedlings and the vegetative growth stage. We can also do fermented fruit juice for later on in the plant's life, for when it's starting to grow fruit. But this will serve my purposes right now because I'm going to be planting pretty soon. And so basically what we do is we're going to take this stuff. I've gone ahead and chopped it up already just to save time in this video, as well as my sugar. The sugar I'm using is this raw sugar, raw cane sugar, that is pretty abundant here. They grow a lot of sugar cane because we live right next to a refinery. And so what happens here is that we're going to mix the sugar, and through what's called a process of osmotic pressure, which is basically just the dryness of the sugar is going to be pulling out the liquids from the plant. Now the plant leaves, they're covered with all kinds of microbes, mostly lactic acid bacteria and yeasts, which are very beneficial for plant growth. On top of that, we're going to be extracting some of the chlorophylls and some of the other plant essences, because during this process of fermentation we make some weak alcohols that help to break those down, and there's also enzymes in this process that help to break it down. And so one last thing that's important before I go ahead and mix this up is that your plants should be collected in the early morning, because the chemical composition of the leaves is different. Throughout the day they're going through the process of photosynthesis, and at night it is the contrary, and so they're going to be storing a lot more of their chemicals and their nutrients in their leaves overnight. And so I got up nice and early this morning at about 6 o'clock and picked all of these plants. We don't actually use the whole plant, we just use the growing tips, about the first 10 or 15 centimeters. So that's 4 to 6 inches. So just about this. And it doesn't really matter if your plant has started to flower, you can use those as well in the fermented plant juice. So when we mix it with sugar, what we're going to do is we're going to mix equal parts by weight. So I have about a pound of leaves here, and I'm using about a pound of sugar. I might be a little bit over on the sugar, but it's not the end of the world. Usually we don't go over because we don't like to waste, but in this particular process it's going to help to preserve the end product a little bit more, to have a higher content of sugar, which will help to feed the bacteria and the yeast, which are going to be in our final product. And so I'm going to go ahead and start mixing this in. We're just going to mix it around lightly so that the surface of all these leaves gets covered. Alright. It's a messy process, but this stuff is so sweet it doesn't even attract ants, so that's nice. Do want to get this done before the water shuts off for the day though. It's also one thing to note is that when you're collecting plants, it's best not to collect them right after a rain, because you really do want all of those bacteria and yeasts that are on the leaves of the plant. And so it's best, if it's just rained recently, to wait 2 or 3 days before you collect this material. So we're going to go mixing this around. Make sure all of our leaves are well coated. When I'm done with this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pack it into, it's recommended to use earthenware, like a clay jar, but I don't have that, so I'm going to go ahead and just use an old coffee jar that I have sitting around. It's glass. It's best not to do this in plastic if you can avoid it. If you do have to do it in plastic, use HDPE because that's safer, but it's best to do this in glass. We're going to go ahead and pack that up. As you can see, I've got this all pretty much the sugar's mixed in, and it's already starting to get a little bit watery. You can see the process is starting already of pulling those liquids out of the leaves. Alright, it should be good enough. Now let's see here.